Born in 1824 to a wealthy ranching family near Camargo, Mexico, Juan Nepomuceno Cortina became one of the most controversial figures along the Texas-Mexico border during the mid-19th century. He came of age during a tumultuous period when the Rio Grande had recently been established as the international boundary between the United States and Mexico. He had a strong bond with regions that abruptly came under American control after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 because of his mother's vast land holdings, which spanned what would become South Texas. After Texas became a part of the United States, Cortina, who was tall, powerful, had piercing eyes, and had a dominating presence, saw personally how Mexican landowners were systematically evicted. American settlers, lawyers, and opportunists manipulated the legal system, often requiring Spanish-speaking landowners to defend their claims in English-only courts. Many families lost generations of heritage through dubious legal maneuvers, creating a powder keg of resentment along the border. Cortina's transformation from privileged rancher to notorious outlaw began on a fateful day in 1859 in Brownsville, Texas. Witnessing a marshal brutally beating a former employee of his mother's ranch, Cortina intervened. The confrontation escalated, ending with Cortina shooting the marshal and escaping with the Mexican vaquero. This incident, born from his sense of justice against mistreatment of Tejanos, sparked what would become the Cortina Wars. Within months, Cortina gathered a following of disenfranchised Mexicans and Tejanos. On September 28, 1859, he led nearly 100 mounted men into Brownsville at dawn. The Mexican flag was flown over government buildings as they took over the town. Cortina issued his famous proclamation declaring protection for Tejanos against Anglo oppression, while specifically instructing his men not to harm women, children, or any Mexican citizen's legitimate property. For nearly 2 days, Cortina held Brownsville. Executing several men he blamed for land frauds and legal injustices against Mexican landowners. His actions, while condemned by authorities as banditry, represented to many dispossessed Tejanos a righteous stand against systematic theft of their heritage. As Texas Rangers and U.S. military forces mobilized against him, Cortina withdrew to his mother's ranch, beginning a campaign that would establish him as both folk hero and notorious outlaw along the Rio Grande frontier. The years following the Brownsville raid transformed Juan Cortina into the most wanted man in Texas. Operating from both sides of the Rio Grande, he orchestrated a series of bold attacks against ranches, settlements, and military positions. His intimate knowledge of the borderland's terrain provided a crucial advantage, allowing his forces to strike suddenly and disappear into the mesquite thickets and ravines that characterized the region. American newspapers nicknamed him the Red Robber of the Rio Grande, referring to his distinctive red beard and flamboyant leadership style. By early 1860, Cortina commanded nearly 500 men, a formidable irregular army that required both Texas Rangers and U.S. Army forces to combat. Major Samuel Heintzelman deployed federal troops alongside ranger companies led by Rip Ford and William Tobin. Despite this combined military pressure, Cortina repeatedly outmaneuvered his pursuers. His guerrilla tactics maximized his smaller numbers' effectiveness, strategically attacking isolated units before melting away into territory where he enjoyed local support. The conflict escalated beyond a simple criminal pursuit, developing into a genuine border war with political dimensions. Cortina portrayed himself not as an outlaw, but as a revolutionary leader fighting for Mexican-American rights. In his proclamations, he specifically targeted corrupt officials and land speculators rather than ordinary citizens. This selective approach earned him widespread support among Tejanos, who viewed him as their defender against institutional discrimination. Mexico's complicated political situation during this period provided Cortina additional leverage. The Mexican government, while officially disavowing his actions, made little effort to apprehend him on their side of the border. Some Mexican officials secretly sympathized with his cause, viewing his resistance as continuation of conflicts stemming from the Mexican-American War. This tacit support allowed Cortina safe haven whenever American forces pressed too close. By 1861, with the outbreak of the American Civil War, Cortina recognized an opportunity to further his objectives. As federal troops withdrew from Texas to fight in eastern campaigns, the border region became increasingly vulnerable. Cortina aligned himself with Union forces, recognizing that Confederate Texas represented the same power structure that had dispossessed Mexican landowners. This political maneuvering revealed his sophistication beyond mere banditry. He understood how larger political conflicts could serve his regional objectives. Throughout this period, Cortina developed a reputation for dramatic flair. He often wore elaborate military uniforms of his own design, complete with medals and insignia declaring himself general of his self-proclaimed border republic. This theatrical self-presentation contributed to his mystique, making him not just a military opponent, but a symbol of resistance against American expansion in the borderlands. The conclusion of the American Civil War brought significant changes to Juan Cortina's campaign. While the Confederacy's defeat removed one of his enemies, Reconstruction-era Texas presented new challenges and opportunities. Appointed as military governor of Tamaulipas in 1865, Cortina leveraged his position to continue cross-border operations under the guise of official Mexican authority. This political legitimacy allowed him to build what essentially functioned as a personal fiefdom along the northern Mexican frontier. During this period, Cortina's cattle operations became legendary. His men conducted massive cattle drives, moving thousands of animals north across the border. American ranchers accused him of orchestrating the largest cattle rustling enterprise in Texas history, while his supporters characterized these activities as reclamation of property stolen from Mexican landowners through fraudulent legal processes. The truth likely incorporated elements of both perspectives. Cortina operated in moral gray areas where justice and criminality blurred according to which side of the border defined the terms. By the 1870s, Cortina's power had grown to such extent that it threatened centralized Mexican authority. President Porfirio Diaz, consolidating power and seeking improved relations with the United States, ordered Cortina's arrest in 1875. Removed from his border stronghold to Mexico City, Cortina spent his final decades under varying degrees of government supervision and imprisonment. Though his direct influence waned, his legend only grew along the borderlands he once dominated. When Cortina passed away in 1894, he left behind a complicated legacy that is difficult to pin down. To Anglo historians of the early 20th century, he represented a dangerous bandit who threatened American settlement and progress. To many Mexican Americans, particularly those whose families lost lands during this period, he remained a folk hero who stood against institutional discrimination when legal recourse failed. Modern scholarship recognizes Cortina as an early resistance figure who challenged Anglo-American expansion and discrimination decades before better-known civil rights movements. The conflicts embodied in Cortina's story continue to resonate in border relations today. Issues of sovereignty, cultural identity, and historical justice remain relevant in a region still shaped by the events of his era. A complex character who alternated between the roles of politician, revolutionary, rancher, and bandit, Juan Cortina embodied the complex dynamics of borderland life during a pivotal moment in the conflict between Mexican and American civilization along the disputed banks of the Rio Grande. Whether viewed as villain or hero, his impact on borderlands history remains undeniable, a testament to how individuals can emerge as powerful symbols during times of social and political transformation.